Well, yeah, unfortunately I have to talk about demonology again, but in Western culture, say English literature, take an example. At the moment, there's a vast popular genre called fantasy writing, which is a fairly loose definition, but yeah, I mean, there's fantasy writing can include science fiction and medieval historical fictions and fantasy, magic, wizards, type writings, and good examples are C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, who are recent popular authors, and they made some recent popular films out of their books. But I mean, the genre today, what's known today as the genre of fantasy writing, started off largely with the Romantic movement in the 19th century. 19th century Romanticism, yeah, it's famous. There's Keats, and Coleridge, and Wordsworth, and later there was Lord Byron and Tennyson, and the Romantic movement wasn't confined to literature. Obviously, the fantasy aspect of the literary movement gave rise to a great deal of paintings of romantic subjects. There was a lot of food for the imagination. So anyway, this earlier there's been there's this things like earlier centuries, things like Dante's Inferno, which was a famous adaptation of some themes from the Aeneid, as well as other things. And Milton, I mean John Milton's famous Paradise Lost, brought together a lot of sort of disparate mythological writings that were ideas from mythological writings that were around, but the real, I mean, one of the inspirations of people like Dante and Milton was earlier, like from the 1st century BC, the Book of Enoch, which is for a long time a lost work, until in the 19th century the full text of the Book of Enoch was discovered to exist in Ethiopic, which is quite an interesting area in itself. But there's a whole related subject of demonology and angelology, which is what I might need to talk about, because there's this sort of strange crossover from fantasy to belief where some people believe in these angels and demons. And the thing about demonology, part of its claim to being authentic or real or relevant or important is it's somehow based in the Bible or sourced from the Bible. And there's things like Lucifer and Azazel and Amalek and Lilith, the female demon or something. But they all make this claim to be somehow have originated from the Bible or be reflected in the Bible. And we should take, why not to take, for example, take for example the Hebrew Old Testament, because a lot of these issues hinge on the interpretation of the Hebrew Bible, and so a lot of these things like Lilith and Azazel claim to be from rabbinical mythology or something, and originally Bible. But the Hebrew Bible was written between 1500 BC and 500 BC, and from then on, after the Babylonian captivity, the Israelites tended to speak Aramaic, Imperial Aramaic, which was, from what I can glean, is a mutually intelligible language to Babylonian, or very similar. And so I think Babylonian has also got the appellation Imperial Aramaic. But anyway, the Hebrew Bible is, well, it's actually, there's been Hebrew grammarians for centuries, and it's a fairly well understood language, except at points where occasionally in the Hebrew Old Testament you find dense or cryptic words or collections of letters that almost defy ingenuity to translate. And these are there's quite a few of them. Now, like any translator, someone who wants to interpret a difficult, obscure word or phrase in Hebrew, like any translator, one approach is to say, well, it's just like the ancient equivalent of a typo. It's a copying error. It's a mistake. Somebody was drawing a letter and he actually drew a very similar letter and did notice. And this was an error that became propagated by later copyists. That's one argument. And there's another approach to say this is just an obscure Hebrew word we've forgotten the meaning of, or what's very popular is in Semitic, what's called Semitic philology, is to fish around in the languages of neighbouring peoples, like Arabic and Aramaic and Phoenician and that sort of thing. It's quite popular to fish around in those languages for words that that might explain an obscure Hebrew one, assuming that it's a borrowing. It's a borrowing from a local neighboring tribe, or it's just an ancient survival of a time when both cognate languages were spoken, was one language. That's the whole evolution of language hypothesis. As regards, for example, the Lucifer idea in the Old Testament, the word Lucifer in the Old Latin Bible, the Old Latin Old Testament, only occurs once in Isaiah 14:12, and it's a strange cryptic collection of letters. 9 letters is all you've got, and you see there is no provenance for the Lucifer idea. There's, in the old Hebrew Old Testament, there's no book of Lucifer. There's no chapter on Lucifer. There's no paragraph on Lucifer. There's no sentence, not even a clause. Well, there's 9 letters. Now, if you literally translate those letters, it comes out to be something which is almost nonsensical. Hillel ben Shahar, shining sun of the morning, which is the child of the morning. What is that? How does the morning have a sun? And it got translated in the 3rd century BC into Greek by the translators, the Septuagint translators, as Eosphoros, or Eosphoros Haproian Atelon, which is sounds like some kind of paraphrasistic conjecture, almost like he's got 2 different possibilities, and it's been translated as morning star, because Eosphoros is a Greek word said to be used to describe Venus, but I've argued in the past that Ben Shahar refers to the Aramaic word for morning. There's a hey and a heth, and one's pronounced like an H, and one's pronounced like guttural, like el-hayam, life in Hebrew. But anyway, the idea that the son of the moon, or the son of the moon god translation is interesting, because Isaiah 14 is a prophecy made by Isaiah in the 8th century against the king of Babylon, and it's interesting, curious to note that the last king of Babylon was Belshazzar, who was famous, you can read in the book of Daniel, for Belshazzar's feast, where he was using the vessels from the Temple of Solomon as dishes at his party, and this precipitated the writing on the wall incident, where a mysterious hand appeared and wrote words of judgment upon the wall of the palace. And this was on or about the night of Cyrus the Great's capture of the city of Babylon. But it's curious to note that this same Belshazzar was reviving the moon god cult in the Babylonian Empire. Because he was acting as a regent for his father or grandfather. It's not clear. But yeah, that's an interesting observation. But yeah, Lucifer. There's. I mean, that's all there is. There's one occurrence of the word, which is a Latin translation of a Greek word, which is a translation of a Hebrew word. Of 9 letters, and if you take the Hillel part out, you've only got 5 letters. And if you're determined to try to shove this Lucifer thing into the Old Testament, at least, you've only got 5 letters. So of disputed meaning, and so yeah, that's the Lucifer thing in the Old Testament.